All right, so my name is Charles Burroughs, and again, this is Fitness Mythbusters, where we're going to talk about nutrition and how it relates to exercise. So I'm the Fitness Services Coordinator for University Recreation over at the Student Recreation Center. Some of the things that I do, I oversee the personal training program over at the Rec Center, as well as the Robert E. Witt Center. I also oversee some of the small personal training, group personal training programs that we do. In the past, they've been called like Summer Slim Down, Morning Mayhem, stuff like that. So we are on a little bit of a pause for those kind of programs, but hopefully here in the near future, we'll be able to get started with those again as well. So I am going to do my best to kind of keep an eye on the Q&A as well as over here on my PowerPoint. So I will be going back and forth. But again, if you have any questions at any time, please feel free to just shoot them at me. I'm more than happy to stop and address it and talk a little bit more about that. All right, so Fitness Mythbusters, this is something that I'm really excited about, that I really like to talk about. I've been in fitness now for about 6-7 years, working as a personal trainer and group exercise instructor. I've been here at the university for about 2 years, come next week, so I guess next week is my anniversary. But I've also spent several years in commercial fitness and corporate wellness as well. And the only reason I bring that up is there are a lot of different aspects to the fitness industry, you know, a lot of different trends and just kind of mentalities of the way that we approach fitness. And I've been very lucky to kind of get a glimpse at each and every one. And a lot of the myths and, you know, discussions that we're going to have today are going to pop up in different places of those areas. So like commercial gyms or in corporate settings, because it does change. You know, it's funny in an era where there's so much information available to us for fitness, right? I mean, it's really at our fingertips, that it's also one of the hardest times to actually begin a fitness program or try to reach some sort of result. And it's not so much because we don't have access to that information, but part of it is that we have access to both correct and incorrect information. Someone once said, I forgot who said it, but a really popular thing is that it's called analysis by paralysis. Wait, paralysis by analysis. In other words, there's so much information and you're having to look at so much when you're trying to make a decision that it's just overwhelming. And so instead of doing anything, we just stop and say, you know what, this is too much. I'm just not going to do it. And so that is really one of the biggest issues that I think that we face today. It's not having access to information, but having too much. You know, most personal trainers don't want to admit it, but the truth is a lot of what they know can be found through a quick Google search. The hard part is just ciphering through what is correct and what is not. So that is the goal for this webinar, and specifically about nutrition and exercise. So if you've ever seen the show Mythbusters before, we're going to follow kind of a similar concept. We're going to bring up a saying, and rather just saying it's a myth or no, it's true, we're going to kind of dive into the science behind it and talk about it. And that way, I think you'll be more equipped to understand these different concepts and achieving any goals that you do have. All right, so I'm going to share my PowerPoint real quick. Right. Perfect. All right, so let's dive right into our first myth. So saying number one, don't exercise on an empty stomach. I really like this one. There's actually a lot of different variations of this concept or this idea. Some people say, you know, you should only exercise when you've eaten beforehand. Others will say, no, don't exercise on an empty stomach. So really with this one, we're going to actually address quite a few different kind of sub-myths or different contexts within this myth, basically regarding eating before exercise. And so one thing I want to kind of clarify on this is when I say don't eat on an empty stomach, or what we're saying here is basically a fasted state. So not that, oh, you have food in your stomach or you don't, but really how long has it been since you've eaten? And for our intents and purposes, it's going to be about 6 to 8 hours minimum or longer. So this is often said in regards to strength training or muscle building specifically. A lot of people will say, you know what, if you're not eating the right stuff beforehand, you're not going to get the same results. You might not be able to build this same muscle, or you're not getting enough energy for that workout. It is commonly believed that exercising on an empty stomach can hinder your progress. So let's first talk about food, because food is energy. I think that's something that we can pretty much all agree, right? In order to sustain ourselves, in order to have energy to get through the day or to exercise, we've got to eat. And food is absolutely essential. And we also, I think everyone knows that there are 3 main macronutrients when we talk about food. One thing I want to say here, though, before we move on anymore, is that I am not a registered dietitian. I am also not a medical doctor. However, I have researched nutrition a lot in regards to exercise. So the way that I talk about things is going to be specific to how it relates to exercise. Also, a lot of the things that I say are in relation to people who I assume are fairly healthy and don't have any specific conditions that can change this stuff. So I just want to go ahead and put that out there. So we're talking about the 3 main macronutrients: protein, carbs, and fat. These are used a lot by our body to create energy. What's awesome about our body is that each of these macronutrients are used in different ways, not just because each of them are different, but also because we have different energy systems that utilize them dependent on the duration of the activity, the intensity, and a lot of other factors. So our bodies are really smart and efficient at using food for energy, and there's a lot of different ways it can do it, which is good because not all of our diets are perfect, right? So let's talk about protein first. I like to call this one the builder. Protein, and also by extent amino acids, which are basically the building blocks of protein, they are necessary to build and also repair or rebuild muscle. And the reason I kind of differentiate those is I think a lot of people think they just need protein if they want to build muscle. But protein is also really important in order to repair our muscle after we exercise. This is especially true if we're doing any kind of resistance training where we're taxing our muscles a lot. So we do need protein to help rebuild that. Just also as a fun fact, protein is utilized a lot in growth of other organs in our body, like skin, hair, nails, and a lot more. So protein is really vital to our function just as humans. So it's not just in regards to muscle. However, I will say when we're talking about fitness, we're usually going to talk about how protein relates to it. Now, protein is not typically used as energy during exercise. Like I said, it's mostly for recovery, for rebuilding. And I do say typically because our bodies can utilize it if it needs to, but it's not ideal. Really, the only time we see our body using protein as an energy source is when it's lacking the other kinds of macronutrients to use for energy. So if we're using protein, we're probably not at a good place nutritionally. Especially because our body usually gets this protein by breaking down the muscles that we currently have. And that's obviously not ideal and can even be toxic in some situations. So ideally, we don't necessarily want protein to be our energy source when we're working out. Now, the second one is carbs or carbohydrates. I like to call this one the powerhouse. I put on there, carbohydrates are the most utilized source of energy in the body. This is mostly true, but it is very close to fats. Both carbs and fats are used a lot as energy in our bodies. They're just used in different circumstances. The body's process for converting carbs to energy is really fast and really efficient. Because of this, our body loves carbs. It kind of makes sense when you think about it, right? Everyone seems to crave carbs at some point or another. And it's because our body really likes that as a source for energy because it's just so efficient. And as a result of this efficiency and this speed of converting it into a simple sugar and then being used into the muscle to create energy, because that's such a fast process, it's used mostly in moderate to high intensity exercise. So really anything from a light jog to a sprint, even with heavy weightlifting, any kind of explosive movement, we're usually going to be using carbs as that source of energy. Now, there is a difference between simple and complex carbs. I don't want to get too into this. This isn't a nutrition class. But what is important to know is that simple carbs are called that because they're very simply structured molecularly. Only reason you need to know that is that means it gets absorbed really fast into our body. Now, complex carbs, because they're more complex, they take longer to break down, longer to be absorbed and to be used as energy in our bodies. That'll be important here in just a bit when we get to it. But let's go ahead and move on to fats. So I like to call these the reserves. Even though they are the second most used energy source, they are used a lot in our body. It's used a lot for processes that aren't as high demanding for energy. So kind of simple things that we're doing at rest, fat will be used a lot to fuel those activities. Also, when we're thinking about, in terms of exercise, really low intensity activities, such as like a slow walk or even a medium paced walk or like a slow bike ride, hiking, stuff like that, we're going to be using fat more as an energy source rather than utilizing carbohydrates. And the reason for this is that the body's process for breaking down fats is actually a lot slower than it is for carbs. And I don't want to give fats a bad rep. They're still awesome. It's just that process is a little slow. They do make up for it in the amount of energy you can get out of even just a little bit of fat, but it is a slower process. So that's why our body will kind of differentiate which energy source we're using based on the demand that our body is putting on it. So let's talk about fuel for workouts. The type of fuel necessary for exercise depends a lot on the intensity. Like I just said, fats are going to be for lower intensity, and while carbs are going to be for high intensity. And then we're talking about protein, mostly it's just going to be for recovery. Our bodies typically have enough stored energy for most workouts. So the good news is that because of that, we don't have to eat right before a workout in order to get energy for it. Our carbs are stored in several different ways. One way is called muscle glycogen. You don't have to remember that name. Just know that what that means is that it's stored right next to our muscles inside our body so that when we need it, it's right there to be used. Now, of course, we know how that's stored. It's stored in fat cells and adipose tissue. But what that means is that we do have energy available to work out. It's especially true when we're doing workouts of kind of low to moderate intensity, or I would say low to moderate timing. In other words, something that's less than an hour, less than 90 minutes. Most cases, we're going to have plenty of energy to do that workout without having to eat anything during or before it. And also with resistance training as well. And one thing that's interesting actually is that there is some research to show that fasted cardio exercise can improve hormone regulation and weight loss. Now, there's a lot of debate onto the extent that it does help with that, but there is some research to support that fact. So not only can you exercise on an empty stomach, but it can be beneficial in certain situations. So talking a little bit more about when do I need to eat before exercise, when do I don't? Activities that are long in duration, such as hikes, marathons, bike rides, something that you're going to be spending hours and hours on, it's probably a good idea to have something beforehand. That way we're not relying just on the stored energy in our body. We also have something in our bloodstream being digested to take in as well. Also, for any kind of intense activity where performance is really important, it's probably not a good idea for a football player to fast right before a football game because more than likely that is going to affect their performance. Similar with like powerlifting or really any kind of intense activity that's going to last a long time. So again, things that are long in duration, things where performance is crucial, and then things that are both long and intense, also probably going to look at wanting to have nutrition beforehand. Now, one important thing to understand, though, about eating before exercise is that most nutrients take 2 to 3 hours to begin absorption in the body. That's not for every single kind of food, but that is a generally pretty good statement for most foods. The one exception is going to be simple carbs. And if we have any diabetics in here watching, or someone who is, they understand how important and true that statement is. Simple carbohydrates can be quickly absorbed into the body to be used as energy and also help regulate our blood sugar. So simple carbs can also be a good source of quick energy, which we'll talk a little bit more here in just a bit. So some other considerations. As we've gotten to this point, we've kind of talked about eating before or fasting before. And as of right now, we've kind of accepted the fact that both are acceptable in some situations. Some things to consider, though, is that when exercising in a fasted state, One thing you want to consider is fatigue. You may notice that if you're used to like eating before exercise, or maybe you usually work out like after lunch and then you decided you want to work out first thing in the morning before you eat, pay attention to your fatigue levels. You might find that before you were utilizing a lot of the energy that was from the food you've eaten, while if you start working out in a fasted state, it's completely relying on just what you have stored in your body. And if that runs out, your blood sugar can drop, you can get tired, fatigued, even a little grumpy. So that's something that I would suggest monitoring. Also, I would suggest avoiding extensive high intensity training. And I put a recommendation of 45 minutes of an RPE, which RPE is just a perceived exertion. So if I'm at an 8 out of 10, that's pretty high intensity. And if you're going to do that for a long period of time, 45 minutes or more, then it's probably not a great idea to do that in a fasted state. Because you might find that when you're doing something high intensity, that those stores, when they do go away, it happens fast. And then it might be an uh-oh moment. Now I'm nauseous. Now I'm not feeling very good. Perhaps that wasn't a good idea. And then also post-exercise refuel, or just eating afterwards, becomes even more important, because if we're exercising in a fasted state, we know we're going to use everything that's stored, or most of it. And so eating afterwards is going to become more important in those scenarios. Now, when eating before exercise, another consideration is to avoid eating really big, heavy meals. I'd say 90 minutes or less before a workout. While some people can get away with it and feel fine, most people, it's probably going to be a detriment to your workout. Fun fact, I think it's fun. If you get nauseous because you have a full stomach while you're exercising, it's because when you're digesting food, all your blood, or most of your blood, starts to rush towards the stomach to help aid in digestion. When we start exercising, that blood gets redirected to our muscles. And anytime our body senses that digestion is not going properly, that's when we start to feel nauseous or even have stomach cramps, stuff like that. And then also one other thing to consider when eating before exercise is that simple carbs can be consumed 5 to 30 minutes before to give a little extra energy. So maybe you realize before a workout, oh, I haven't eaten anything in a long time. I know this is going to be a tough workout. You could eat something like a banana, a piece of fruit, and that might give you just a little bit extra energy so that you feel good throughout that workout. So generally speaking, if you're going to eat a normal meal, I would do so at least 90 minutes or before or more before a workout. And then with simple carbohydrates, something light, you could eat that really just right before a workout, even on your way to the gym, and you'll be totally fine. All right, so the statement, don't exercise on an empty stomach, myth busted. You can work out on an empty stomach. You can also eat before exercise. A lot of it depends on the circumstance. Just know that you're not going to miss out on any results because you're not eating right before exercise. So do we have any questions on that before I move on to the next one? So I do like to leave a little bit of time for questions just in case. I'm going to check the Q&A and chat real quick here, and if not, we'll go ahead and move on. All right. Looks like we're good. Perfect. Okay, so we'll go ahead and move on to our next saying. So, saying number 2, you need to eat 30 minutes after a workout or less to get the best results. This is actually a really common belief in the fitness industry, even amongst fitness professionals like personal trainers. And it's this idea that if you want to get the best results, whether it's building muscle or maybe it's you want to be able to eat something and it not affect your calories as much, it's this idea that you got to eat it right after the workout. Basically, it's a belief that there is a short anabolic window immediately after exercise. And during this window, there are a few conditions that exist or that we believe exist. One being is that muscles are more absorbent to protein and to building muscle. So we just worked out, our muscles are slightly damaged from the exercise. It needs to repair, rebuild, and so it's anxious and eager to get protein. Also, all the carbs that we had stored or that we had eaten before have been used. So if we eat carbs right after that workout, it's going to be quickly absorbed and stored. In other words, it's not going to be detrimental to us. It's going to be put to a purpose. And then also kind of similar to this is belief that during this window, calorie burning is higher immediately after exercise. Our heart rate's still elevated. We're still consuming more oxygen than normal. And so that's the belief surrounding this idea that we need to eat right after. And so I put 30 minutes on there, but really it's just this idea that it needs to happen right after in order to get some sort of benefit, or the belief that there's more benefit to eating right after exercise. So let's talk about this, post-exercise nutrition. Eating after exercise does refuel the body. We know that. And depending on the type of workout, what energy we used, that it is going to replenish our muscle glycogen or our stored carbs. It's going to help kind of re-elevate or rebalance our blood sugar, can help regulate hormone levels. Also with protein synthesis and repairing and building muscle, post-exercise eating can absolutely help with all those things. In fact, some prior research has shown that this short anabolic window where it's right after exercise, it did show it to be true. However, and I love the statement however, the original research was done specifically with people who were in a fasted state. So kind of going to our last myth. These people were in a fasted state when they're exercising. And so what we actually have discovered since then with more research and a couple of meta-analyses looking at lots of different studies all at once is that if you are fasted before a workout, then that window is going to be a bit more intense right after you exercise. It's even more absorbent. And the theory there is basically that all of our stored energy is completely used up and we don't have a lot in our bloodstream, not much. So in order to help get that refilled, we got to do it right then when the conditions are right. However, for most individuals, as long as you're following a normal diet, you really don't have to worry about that precise window. Recent research has shown that it really can be anywhere from eating 2 hours before to 8 hours and even up to 12 hours after exercise. You'll still get similar effects. There's not going to be a noticeable difference in how much muscle you build or how much weight you lose because of the timing of those meals. So generally speaking, as long as you're getting that refuel after exercise, you're going to be fine. It doesn't have to be 30 minutes. It doesn't have to be right in an hour. I definitely don't want you to think that, oh, I just worked out, I got to run grab a protein shake or run grab something to eat in order to get some sort of results. Now, you might discover that if your blood sugar is really low or something like that, then you might need to go get something to help kind of even yourself out. But as far as results related to fitness, it's simply not true. There's not a specific tight window that you have to fit in your meal afterwards in order to get results. And hopefully that is comforting, because I know a lot of people, they feel like, oh, well, if I didn't do it, my results are ruined. This is going to affect my program. But most of the time it's not. You're not going to notice any measurable effect if you eat right after or if you eat 2 hours after. So some considerations here. I would suggest choosing foods that do fulfill those 3 macronutrients: protein, carbs, and fat. It's not just that you should eat after a workout or that you should refuel, but think about what kind of energy you use during that workout. If it was real high intensity, then you probably should get some carbs in you. Similarly, if you were trying to build muscle or if you did a lot of resistance training, it's probably a good idea to get some protein in there for a post-workout meal. Also, and I keep bringing this up, but again, simple carbohydrates can alleviate some like blood sugar issues, or like if you're feeling a little nauseous after a workout, sometimes that could be due to low blood sugar. And if that's the case, it's worth a shot just to try it and see if that makes you feel a little bit better. If fasted during exercise, try to eat a little bit sooner after a workout. Again, there isn't a specific window, but like I said with that previous research, is that if you're in a fasted state, you're probably a little bit more needy of nutrients and to refuel. So it's a good idea to make that happen. And then lastly, I almost missed this one. Lastly, listen to your body after workouts. That sounds kind of vague, I understand. But our cravings a lot of times do tell us something about what our body needs. Not all the time, You know, if your body is saying, oh, I want a cheeseburger right after this workout, that doesn't necessarily mean go get a cheeseburger, but maybe that means you do need to go get some protein, carbs, and fat after the workout. If after your workout, you're not really hungry, then you know what, you might be totally fine. You will be totally fine, and you probably don't have to go eat right then and there. So listen to your own cravings and what you're feeling. That's going to really help in this process because obviously everyone is different. All right, any questions about this one before we move on? Check the chat, Q&A real quick just to make sure. All right, Lauren did say, hey, please send a copy of your PowerPoint presentation. I'll make sure to get that to Ashley or Carolyn so that they can post it online or share it some way. I'll get with them on the details, but we can definitely make sure you guys get a copy of this. All right, if there's no other questions, we will go ahead and move on. All right, let me get my share back on the screen and we'll continue. So, almost forgot this part. This is very important. So, you need to eat 30 minutes after exercise to get the best results? No, myth busted. While your body is favorable for growth and nutrient absorption after exercise, there isn't a super specific window there. As long as we're eating something after a workout, we're going to be good to go. And that can be 30 minutes, that can be 3 hours. As long as it's a fairly reasonable time, we'll be totally fine. Myth busted. Okay, moving on to the next one. Belief. I can eat more because I exercise. I've definitely been in this guy's shoes at some point or another. So this is based on really two commonly held concepts, whether we realize it or not. And one is quite simply that during exercise, we're burning calories, right? We're burning more calories than we would if we weren't exercising. But then closely related to that is also the belief that as a result of regular exercise, our resting metabolism, so the calories we're burning when we're resting, when we're not working out, also increases. So those are the two concepts we're dealing with here. I want to address each one individually. So the first one, metabolism at rest. This is actually based on a few different ideas. Even if you haven't heard of these before, these are really, really common in the fitness industry. So a lot of these things I've heard straight from the mouths of personal trainers themselves. But it is important to understand them in context and really whether or not they're true. So the first one, specifically in regards to resting metabolic rate, or RMR, is that we can increase this resting number through muscle hypertrophy, or quite simply gaining muscle. So we actually do know that research has shown us building muscle does burn calories. Similar to every other organ and tissue in our body, it does burn calories at rest. But I think there is a disconnect here in that a lot of people think that we burn a lot more calories at rest from our muscle than we actually do. The truth is that our total muscle mass really only contributes to about 20% of that resting metabolic rate. So when we're relaxed, we're chilling, we're watching TV, we're sleeping, our muscles are not burning very much calories. What we're talking about is about 4.5 to 7 calories per pound of muscle that we have on our body while at rest throughout the day. This is quite a bit different than what is commonly touted. At my first job as a personal trainer, a trainer there that I really respected and I still do, awesome person, he told me that for every pound of muscle I gain, I'd burn 60 to 100 calories. So if I gain 10 pounds of muscle, I'd burn an additional 1,000 calories a day while at rest. And that's not true. That is extremely over-exaggerated. And really what we're looking at number is really going to be closer to like 60, 70 calories if you were to gain 10 pounds of muscle. So not quite as much as an effect as some people think, but it does have some effect on our metabolism. So another way that our metabolism is believed to increase at rest is through post-exercise calorie burning effects, also known as EPOC, or excess post-exercise oxygen consumption. It's a mouthful. But basically the idea is that after bouts of high intensity exercise, our body burns more calories because we're absorbing oxygen at a higher rate than normal. And the process of absorbing oxygen is taxing our metabolism, and it just requires more energy to do so. So this does actually occur. But once again, I think it's touted as a little bit more influential than it really is. So what we've seen through recent studies is that our metabolic rate is elevated from anywhere to 12 to even 48 hours actually after a workout. I know it says 24. There are a few studies that showed up to 48, but that amount of increased metabolism is really not extremely high. What was actually measured is what we saw is about 50 to 100 calories during a time frame after a workout versus not a workout. In other words, there is about 50 to 100 calories more than normal. So if you would normally burn 100 calories during this time frame, like say from 3 to 5 o'clock without exercise, but then you worked out at 2, then what we saw is more like 150 to 200 calories during that time frame. It wasn't necessarily an hour, but you get the picture. Is what we're talking about is exercise can increase that when we're doing high intensity workouts and also high intensity cardio exercise. So think of it as like interval training. So if you go out and you run sprints rather than just a slow jog, if we do those sprints, we might see this EPOC, this excess oxygen consumption after the workout for a short period of time after it occurs. So it is true, it does happen, just not quite at the level as is commonly thought. And then lastly, metabolism can be improved at rest because of reduced hormonal stress, specifically as a result of insulin. So there are studies that show that exercise improves hormone regulation and reduce insulin resistance. If we have high insulin resistance, it can make it a lot more challenging to lose weight because our insulin kind of hinders the process of burning fat. So when we're better able to manage that and regulate it, we do have a more efficient metabolism. And research does confirm that does exist. Once again, though, the challenge is to what extent we're just not really sure. And so if there's one thing you can kind of get from all these 3 different things is that while they do exist, one thing I would avoid is be like, oh, because I worked out, I should just go eat a lot more food than normal. That's not necessarily the case. But before we get to more details on that, let's talk a little bit about burning energy or burning calories during exercise. So I think it's a pretty well-established fact that we burn calories while we're exercising, right? That is commonly understood and accepted. But what we're not 100% sure on, and what can be a source of a lot of controversy, is how many calories we're actually burning. The truth is that there are a lot of factors that go into this. Our age, our weight, gender, fitness level, exercise intensity, duration, exercise selection, how many muscles we're using, what muscles we're using, our heart rate, our body temperature. So many factors go into the amount of calories that we're burning that to accurately calculate this number is almost impossible without some scientific instruments, cutting you open, taking your blood, stuff like that. So it is really challenging to know exactly how many calories we're burning during exercise. And this is a question that I get an awful lot, and that is, should you get a Fitbit? Should you get a fitness tracker? And I don't want to downplay these things. I don't want to say, oh, Fitbits are dumb, because they aren't actually telling you the precise number of calories you're burning. That's not the case. There are a lot of benefits to having these kind of devices, whether it's Fitbits, smartwatches, even some treadmills, machines, they'll track those numbers. But it's important to understand that this is a rough estimate. It is not a precise number. That treadmill might say that you burned 250 calories, but you know what? If you didn't enter your weight, your age, your gender, then it's a ballpark. It really could be 150, it could have been 400. And even if you did enter those factors, it's still not going to be 100% accurate. What I would say is that the devices that consider more factors when you enter it, so if it asks for all those things like age and weight and gender, it's going to be more accurate than just hopping on a machine, hitting start, and trusting that number's right. So the more it knows about you, the more accurate it can be. Just understand it's not going to be precise. And really the value that I see personally, this is just my opinion, about Fitbits and other fitness trackers is part of what makes it awesome is that it does give you a ballpark, but also it's rewarding. It's really beneficial to see, oh, well, this is the measurement of how much work I did. It was 500 calories, or I got this many steps, or whatever it is. It's really helpful from a motivational standpoint. And it's also helpful from a community standpoint, because then you get a chance to share these numbers with your friends. And it just helps us kind of stick with what we're doing better. So again, I don't want to downplay fitness tracking devices by any means, but we would avoid obsessing over the numbers that you see on it, because the truth of the matter is it's not 100% accurate. And I also don't want to discourage you by saying that, because the truth is that 99.9% of people that do experience weight loss or whatever goal that they have, gaining muscle, they still get those without knowing the precise numbers. As long as you're in the right ballpark area, it's still beneficial. Just don't obsess over it too hard. All right, so a few other things. The most significant change in metabolism comes from calories burned during exercise. That's going to be the #1 greatest factor. And just kind of a side note, because I know we talked about muscle and how it affects our resting metabolism. One interesting thing about muscle is that the more muscle we have, the more calories we burn during exercise. So while it's not going to have a huge impact on how many calories we're burning at rest, it actually does have a pretty significant effect on calories burning during exercise. So there is benefit to having muscle mass other than just wanting to be big and strong. Also, the two largest factors in determining the amount of calories burned during physical activity are going to be duration and intensity. So more so than anything else, whether it's gender, fitness level, anything else, the biggest two factors are going to be how long that workout lasts and how intense it is. And then also lastly, people often overestimate the amount of calories they're burning through exercise. This is really, really common, and often kind of paired with that is they underestimate the amount of calories in the food that they're eating. Just because you went and you worked out and you burned, 400 or 500 calories based on your tracker, doesn't mean you should go eat half a large pizza. I know it's very tempting and it sounds awesome, but in terms of, especially if your goal is weight loss, you're going to undo a lot of those calories you burned by going well above and beyond that number, because there are a lot of very calorie dense foods, and a lot of times those are the ones that taste the best. So I would definitely, if you're struggling with weight loss, or if you're struggling with calories as a whole, maybe you want to lose weight or you want to gain weight and you're struggling to do that, I'd really suggest try tracking it for a while. And not just, what you're burning, but what you're actually eating, and look at those numbers and see. We know, science has proven without a doubt that when we eat the same amount of calories as we're burning, we're going to be at homeostasis. We're not going to gain or lose weight. If we are eating less calories than we're burning, we're going to lose weight. And if we're going to eat more calories than what we're burning, we're going to gain weight. That absolutely happens. And if we experience situations where it doesn't seem like that's occur, that's probably because the numbers we have for the calories are off. That is often the most likely factor that's going to occur, is perhaps we got those numbers off just a bit, and that we don't understand our metabolism fully. But a lot of it just comes from tracking and playing around with it to kind of get down to what you're looking for. So other considerations, whether or not you should eat more when you're exercising depends a lot on your goals. If you're wanting to lose weight, I would be weary of eating a lot more than you normally do when you don't exercise, because we still aren't quite sure if you're in that calorie range that's going to result in a deficit, and that's going to result in weight loss. So I really try to avoid that. However, if your goal is to gain weight, then you're going to definitely need to eat more because of exercise, because you already need to eat more in order to gain weight. And you might realize that through your exercise that you end up burning quite a few calories. So it really does depend on your goals. Also, we're really only talking about calories here, not nutritional content. And I kind of said this at the beginning, but I'm not a nutritionist, and there are, of course, a lot of little factors that I'm not considering when I'm just talking about calories in, calories out, stuff like that. Not all calories are the same. Some foods have a lot more benefit to our bodies, and vitamins and minerals and other factors. So I really try to discourage people from only looking at food as calories, because there is a lot more nuance to that should be considered. And the best way to determine really how many calories you're burning is through trial and error and tracking. I'm not saying that you have to do this to reach your goals. Like I said, a lot of people are super successful just by making some lifestyle changes. But if you are struggling with it, then perhaps the best thing you need to do is start writing things down. There's an app called MyFitnessPal. I love that app because it's all right there for you. You put it in your app, you start recording what you eat. It's very easy, and it kind of helps give us a better snapshot of what we're eating and really how it relates to our fitness goals. So that's definitely a suggestion I would have there. And then also you can track your exercise, and body composition tracking can also be very helpful. I mentioned that specifically in regards to really well to gaining muscle and to losing weight, because a lot of times what we'll see is that the scale won't change, but as we start to lose fat, we might also gain muscle and vice versa. So the scale is not always the best way to find out if we're reaching our goals. Sometimes some other body composition testing, such as like skin calipers or circumferential measurements. There's a lot of other things which I can talk with any of you individually about if you like. There are ways to track that, and I definitely suggest it if you're trying to reach a goal and you're struggling to get there. So any questions about this? I'm going to check the Q&A and the chat as well real quick, just to see where we're at, if anyone has anything. Looks like we're good. Let me check the chat real quick. All right, seems like we're good to go. So I'm going to go ahead and resume our PowerPoint. Okay, so can I eat more before or because I exercise? Technically, yes. Yes, you can. Just understand that it's going to be dependent on your goals. And then it does depend a lot on that. So regular exercise does increase your metabolism. It does increase how many calories you're burning throughout the day, both at rest and during exercise. But you should have some caution when exercising that you're not undoing some of those results. Oh, we got a question. So Ashley asks, thoughts on intermittent fasting and exercising? So I have read a lot of research on intermittent fasting, and most of what I've seen is actually pretty good. I wouldn't say that the difference between intermittent fasting and simply eating the same amount of calories spread throughout the day is going to have a significant effect. Some of the research says there are some hormonal benefits to doing that. I'm not an exercise physiologist or a doctor, so I can't touch on the specifics of the science. But there does seem to be some credit to intermittent fasting as it relates to exercise. My best advice to you if you're doing intermittent fasting is to see how your body responds to it while you're fasted. If you find that you work out 3 hours before your first meal and it's really hard and challenging, then maybe you should change the time that you work out or change the window that you're eating in to match that workout. Generally, if you're super fatigued and super tired and it doesn't ever get any better during your workouts, then it might be you want to try to get that timing a little bit closer to after that meal. So rather than working out at noon and then eating for the first time in 24 hours at 3 o'clock, instead try to exercise after your first or second meal or however you're doing the intermittent fasting. So good question. Most of the time, most people who I know that have done intermittent fasting, in addition to their workout program, is they don't have any issues. They might have a week or two where they feel a little more fatigued than normal, but our body is really good at adapting. And so what you might actually find is that your body is more effective at storing energy for your workouts than it would otherwise. That is actually one of the observed scientific benefits of intermittent fasting, is we become a bit more efficient at storing and utilizing the energy that we take in, so we're not just converting it to fat or not using it at all. All right, another question we got, is it better to count carbs or calories? I would suggest total calories. And again, a lot of how many carbs you're eating, stuff like that, is going to depend on what you're doing for your exercise. If you're following a really intense exercise program, then those carbs are probably going to all get used when you're exercising. Our body can get by without a lot of carbs. Again, I don't want to get too far into things like keto diet, stuff like that. But generally, what I would focus on is just trying to be balanced and focusing on calories as a whole, especially if your goal is weight loss. because it doesn't matter how many carbs you're eating. If that calorie number is not below maintenance, then you're not going to lose weight. So I would definitely suggest to focus more on calories rather than carbs. Great question. All right, I think I see another one. We got another one. Donna asked, how important is it to drink water before, during, and after exercise? I would say to do all three. It's really hard to measure our hydration levels without like blood tests, stuff like that. So I would just suggest to try to meet the daily recommendations of at least 8 glasses of water and not worry so much about timing. If you're extremely thirsty then a workout, drink. If you think you're going to sweat a lot before a workout and you're worried about becoming dehydrated because of intense amount of sweat, then drink more. In fact, if you're someone who sweats a lot, I'm one of those people. I will usually drink a lot more before a workout just because of that. But I wouldn't worry too much about the timing of hydration. Just try to keep it spread out and you should be good. So someone asks, is it really healthy to drink a gallon a day of water, or does it depend on how much you weigh? So the research on that is going to be a little bit conflicting. So what I will say is that one thing that water does help do in terms of exercise is it does help with, trying to think the correct word, it does help with blood flow and with, I guess that's the best word we'll say, is it helps with blood flow. It helps to remove toxins and byproducts from exercise. Obviously, it helps with controlling hunger, stuff like that. I would say a gallon is probably okay if you sweat a lot, but really I wouldn't go much above that. A lot of it's going to depend on your goals. If you're struggling to drink water and you keep forcing it down, then maybe you should stop. In my opinion, whether or not you drink 8 glasses of water a day or a gallon and a half is not going to have a significant impact on your results. That's not going to be the deciding factor. So I would try to stick with an intake that's within a healthy range and that just makes sense with your thirst level. You shouldn't just keep forcing down water when you feel hydrated. I wouldn't recommend that at all. That is a good question. I admit I would probably need a little bit more research on that one to talk about it on a scientific level. But from what I do understand, drinking a gallon or more really isn't necessary. And obviously you can drink too much water. So I wouldn't go crazy with it, is my suggestion. All right. If there are no other questions, we'll get on to our next. I don't think there are. Let's see. Okay, so I can eat more because of exercise. That is confirmed. Let's go ahead and move on to our next one. So, supplements. We've already seen a few questions. I get a lot of questions about supplements. So let's talk about it. And this is a belief that taking supplements is necessary to reach my goal. So there are many different types of supplements in the fitness industry, just in regards to exercise. And again, I'm not really going to talk about those supplements that are for other dietary issues or problems. Maybe you have an efficiency, a doctor told you you need to take this supplement. Not addressing that, really just talking about how it relates to exercise. So just within this industry, there are a lot of different types. There's protein, there are powders, bars, shakes. They make brownies, cookies. They even make protein chips. If you like chips, I would not recommend them. They kind of destroy your opinion of chips. That's just me. But they do have a ton of different supplements out there in regards to protein. There's also tons of different kinds of protein. There's whey, casein, soy, egg, plant. They even make a protein that's from meat, but it's not meat. So it's like they break down and derive the protein straight from meat and put it in a powder. That seems kind of silly to me, but they do it. There's also BCAAs, which are branched chain amino acids, are basically, the building blocks of protein. So there are a ton of protein supplements out there. There are also a ton of supplements in regards to pre-workout, caffeine, beta-alanine, citrulline, nitric oxide, just to name a few. You can go to almost any pre-workout that you see at GNC, Walmart, wherever, look at the back, you're guaranteed to see some combination of those ingredients. We also see it as in regards to performance, like choline, carbohydrate supplements, creatine. We see it for recovery, like HMB, glutamine, glycerol, electrolytes. There are tons and tons and tons of supplements. It is a very profitable and a very influential industry within fitness. But do we really need supplements? Well, actually, before that, let's talk about what they do real quick. This is really important because I would never recommend someone take a supplement if they don't know what that supplement does. If you're not sure, then you know what, you probably shouldn't take it. That's just my advice. So with pre-workouts and also with any kind of performance supplement, one big aspect of it is it's quite simply a stimulant. It's going to get you hyped up. It's going to make you feel buzzed. It's going to make you feel like you have more energy because of the caffeine involved. It elevates your heart rate, gets you going. It also, some claim to increase blood flow and oxygen exchange. And actually, this is one claim that some pre-workouts do actually help with. They dilate your blood vessels so that more blood is going through your body, so that oxygen is better exchanged, and so that more energy is getting to your muscles. Now, to the extent of that is still up to debate, but some of them do that. Some supplements also claim to increase stamina and enhance strength. A lot of those kind of claims are unsubstantiated. One of the problems with the supplement industry, and I'm going to get to this more in a bit, is that it's very poorly regulated. So companies can make a lot of pretty crazy claims and they can get away with it because there's not a lot of enforcement on saying, no, you can't do that. Also in regards to supplements regarding protein and recovery, they claim to increase protein synthesis, like muscle building. They claim to help you recover faster, to reduce muscle soreness, to reduce muscle fatigue. So there's a lot of supplements from just about every aspect of exercise, working out, and even weight loss that you can possibly imagine. But that does beg the question, though, are supplements needed? And this is different from beneficial. I will say that there are supplements that are beneficial, but the bigger question is, are they needed? And then from there, we can talk more about the benefits. And really to answer this, the word supplement is kind of indicative of this answer. And a supplement is something that completes or enhances something else when added to it. So a nutritional supplement is going to enhance or complete your nutrition, especially if that's something you're lacking. Supplements should not be your main source of nutrition. That might sound crazy, but there are a lot of fitness professionals that go overboard with supplements, and it starts to become where 50, 60, 70% of your diet is protein shakes, protein bars, and various supplements. I do not recommend it. Supplements can ease problematic areas. That's really what I like to think of supplements as, is it's more of a convenience, or it's help to address something that you're struggling to get in your regular nutrition. So for example, let's say you've realized that the only time you can exercise is first thing in the morning. However, you are not a morning person and you've tried working out and you're tired and you're fatigued and you can't focus, then you know what, maybe taking a pre-workout, that might help get you in the right mindset and to give you the energy you need to get through that workout. Similarly, maybe your goal is to build muscle and you realize that your current diet isn't quite getting you enough protein in order to build muscle. So to help facilitate that, to make it more convenient, maybe you don't like eating lots and lots of meat, or maybe you don't eat meat at all, then having a supplement can help get that number up to make sure that you're hitting those numbers. So really that's what supplements are. They're an additive that can help support the program that we're doing, but they should not be leaned on and they should not be a crutch. Supplements cannot fix a good diet. I can't tell you how many times I've worked with clients who maybe their goal was losing weight, and so we sat down and we talked about the nutrition aspect and what to do, and rather than changing the way they eat, they just started adding supplements. And we get together 6 months from now and we don't see any results. And I'm like, well, why haven't I? And so what I'll ask is, well, what did we change different about what we were eating? And it's like, well, I didn't necessarily change what I ate, but I added some protein powder. I did a pre-workout. I did all these other things. I took a thermogenic to burn fat more, but I didn't lose the weight I wanted. And the big reason for that is they didn't follow the right nutrition. That is the first and most important thing. So are supplements needed for any exercise program? Are they going to be the difference between achieving results and not? No. Most of the time they are not. The only time I'd say they might be is when we're starting to talk about an elite level of fitness, where we're talking about athletes or bodybuilders, where they're having to dial in their nutrition to very specific numbers. In those cases, supplements are going to be more important, but for most people, they're just something nice to have. But the truth of the matter is that supplements are, well, one, they're expensive. They can cost you a lot of money. And so you should ask the question, can I get this through my normal diet? If I can just change a few things and get more protein that way, then do I really need a protein shake? Probably not. And also, as I said before, the supplement industry is poorly regulated. So a lot of companies, they don't have to list everything they have in those supplements. So you might see that it has the main ingredients that you're looking for. This pre-workout has beta-alanine and it has caffeine, but then they'll just put proprietary blend, and that can really be anything. And while most companies might be honest and open, there are always going to be some that aren't, and they're not regulated. And so that can be really challenging. So I definitely recommend that you do your research when you're considering some supplements that you feel like you would otherwise do without. So like a pre-workout, if you would rather do that than like a cup of coffee, do some research about it. That's actually a great example of poor regulation, as there are a lot of really popular pre-workouts where the recommended dosage is equivalent to about 4 to 6 cups of coffee. And that's all at once. We're talking one small scoop is packed full with an insane amount of caffeine. So I'd be very careful when considering supplements. Do your research, try to find someone who's knowledgeable on the topic, and really make sure that this is something that you're missing and not something that you can just do without. And again, I don't want to hate on supplements. I think they're great. I think they have a lot of benefits. Just know that they're not necessary, and that just because you see someone in the gym taking 20 different supplements and they look great or they have the results you want, doesn't mean you need those to get those results. And also, heavy reliance on supplements can have can result in unexpected deficiencies in other aspects of nutrition. Again, I'm not going to get into the deep specifics, but if you think that rather than having a well-rounded meal of like, say, chicken and vegetables and rice, you got your protein, carbs, and fat, there are a lot of nutrients that are in that aren't going to be in a protein shake. You might not get the same vitamins and minerals and other things that are there. So that should be something to consider, is that while it's very easy to think about calories in, calorie out, there are things that we need from food that we just don't get from a supplement. All right, so that is our last one. So I do want to answer any questions if anyone has any. I'm going to check the chat here as well as the Q&A. So Krista asks, are short HIIT, which for those who don't know, that's high intensity interval training workouts, effective? And I say yes, they are. So as long as your workout, high intensity interval training workout, is at least, usually they recommend 15 minutes or more, you will get some benefit from that. Just know that when we're saying high intensity, that's not like a slight jog. High intensity is really just that. I mean, it's like punching a punching bag fast as you can, 30 seconds, or it's sprinting or riding a bike really hard. When we say high intensity, we're talking about a perceived effort of exertion of at least really a 7 to like a 10. So something that's pretty intense. So HIIT workouts are effective, and I do recommend them for people who are trying to improve their cardiorespiratory health, but don't necessarily have an hour or two to spend on a workout. But yes, they are absolutely effective. And what I will say is, of course, the longer the workout, the more benefit you're probably going to get from that workout. All right, any other questions? Let's see, it looks like we have a few in the chat. Okay, so Jacqueline says, most Black people have low vitamin D levels, and my doctor has me on this vitamin and another. We need to have regular checkups and keep a watch on these levels, especially concerning our immune system. That's great advice. Again, I would definitely recommend talking to your doctor about your diet and your nutrition. If you feel like you need a diet plan, or you feel like there's serious issues in your diet, maybe you have some sort of deficiency, then definitely talk to a professional about it. Like I said, I am not a doctor. If you feel like you might have an iron deficiency or something like that, you need to go find a professional. That is definitely not something that I can help with. And it is important that we're talking to professionals. And based on our age, based on our race, based on our gender, there are a lot of different things that we might be predisposed of. And so it is important to check in on those things and making sure we're having a well-rounded diet that gets us all the nutrients we need. And that is a great example, Jacqueline, of a time where you would need one just to help make sure you're getting a well-rounded nutrition. Vitamin D, other examples I've heard of are like iron or magnesium, all great examples of dietary supplements that can just help with general function, not even exercise, just general function. So any other questions before we finish up here? I know you might have tons of questions regarding fitness. It can be anything related to fitness, exercise. If not, we are done. So thank you so much for coming to Fitness Mythbusters. We are going to have another webinar, I believe in October, where we're going to address some different topics related to fitness. But thank you so much for tuning in. I know they're going to upload this to the website and hopefully that PowerPoint as well. So thanks so much, guys. I'm going to hang out here and see if we have any other questions. All right, so anonymous attendee did ask, what do you think of all the healthy teas and shakes? That's going to be tough because there really is a wide variety of those type of supplements, right? As far as teas go, I'd have to say it depends on what it is. If there's a lot of weird looking ingredients that you're not sure of in it, or if it makes some claims that are pretty bizarre, I would research that ingredient specifically and be like, is this really doing what I think it does? For example, green tea has actually been proven to be really beneficial with weight loss. And the reason being is it actually is a stimulant that helps elevate our heart rate and burn more calories at rest. So there are certain teas and shakes that can be beneficial. I would just say that it really depends on which one. And once again, I wouldn't rely too much on those. You know, there's things like Shakeology and stuff like that, where your whole diet basically becomes shakes, and I don't recommend that. Because once again, there might be a lot of nutrients and things that we're missing when we skip out on just regular food as opposed to, you know, teas or shakes. All right, let's see. It looks like we've got another one. Oh, just a comment. I'm not sure which one you're talking about. She said healthy teas, like the new shops popping up in town. I'll be honest, I'm not sure which ones you're talking about. So I'd probably have to go check them out for myself. Again, there's nothing wrong with a protein shake or a protein supplement. Just be careful of relying on that as your source of nutrition. It's very common for people to say, you know what, I got my protein shakes, I've got this supplement, so I'm just going to go eat some Twinkies or something like that. And because I'm getting the good stuff here, I don't have to worry about it here. I really would suggest avoiding that because that can be a path down an unhealthy lifestyle for sure. All right. All right, so someone said, I heard a trainer recommend exercising 5 days a week at a level of 7 out of 10, or say that working out 5 days a week at a level of 7 out of 10 is better than 2 to 3 days a week at level 10, as far as rest or recovery. I would say that, it depends. That's not a great example, but it really depends. If you're getting the same amount of volume of work in those 2 to 3 days as opposed to 5 days, then really there's not going to be a big difference. What I would say is that working out at a 10 is not recommended for most people. A 10 exertion level says you are putting absolutely everything into that and you're going to die if you keep going. That is not recommended for most people if you're not real comfortable with your current fitness level, because it also sets you up to injure yourself if you're not really careful with that. What I will say is that 5 days a week is going to be better because it's a more regularly structured program. You're going to be addressing those things that you're trying to improve more regularly. But if you're doing a lot in those 2 to 3 days that make up the difference of those 5, then there's not going to really be a difference. I would worry more on just trying to create a regular, sustained volume of work when you're working out. If you can only work out 2 days a week, then I would try to do quite a bit in those 2 days. If you're able to work out 5 days a week, you can spread it out more. Maybe your workout only needs to be 30, 45 minutes, and you're totally fine. But I wouldn't really trust a blanket statement that just says 5 days at a 7 is better than 3 days at a 10, because it really depends. All right. Well, again, thank you so much for sticking around, guys. I have a lot of good questions. You can always reach out to me. And actually, I'll pull this slide up just so you can see it. You can always check out what University Recreation has to offer. We have a YouTube channel where we're doing both live and recorded classes in case you don't want to come into the rec center or are not able to. Also suggest following us on social media. And then just feel free to reach out to me at any time if you have questions. My email is quite simply cburroughs@ua.edu. I'm more than happy to meet with you and talk about different questions you might have regarding exercise and nutrition. I just love sharing this stuff with people, so not a problem. All right, so if that's it, thank you so much. Have a great day, guys.